small screen.
Oh, wonderful!
Okay, so we have a bunch of students, and over here another bunch of students and colleagues, conference room in our place here in Chambéry, so not far from Geneva, as I said. Okay, so
great.
how would your question was, do you think it is necessary to have some popularity to fight for human rights?
Short answer is yes. Unfortunately, it's this way because a lot of my academia friends who has worked on human rights issue for years, but for some reason their voices are just never heard. And after I won Miss World Canada, they used my platform to also show their researches. And I was a beauty queen, like very young, wasn't exactly sure what I was talking about, but somehow that worked. So I think popularity is important. Unfortunately, people pay attention to things that are easier to access. And I think entertainment, celebrity, beauty pageants, these things are easier for people to watch in their leisure and to receive instead of like a really serious human rights talk.
Was it hard to realize you had been indoctrinated by the Chinese government? And did it make you question your entire childhood?
It was very hard to sort of understand what Chinese people or the Chinese government was telling me was not right, because everybody listened to the same thing when they were young. And everybody was taught the same messages throughout kindergarten to all the way to university and throughout their lives in the society. And so for me, to come to the realization, even China to Canada, was it took a long process. First, I have to learn about the facts of some persecution of minorities, like Falun Gong and Tibetan and Uyghurs, and to hear these people's side of the story, which was never heard in China when I was there. But then it took me a long while to recognize why communists were able to do such things. I think they were able to do it because a lot of people in China decided to stay silent when other people are being bullied by the government, and they don't want to use their own, or they're afraid to use their own mind or speak their truth because they're afraid that the communists is going to turn on them next. To persecute them. So they didn't speak up, and that's how Cultural Revolution happened. And that's how my father's generation sort of grew up with the political conformity and conformity of conscience. Everybody else decided not to speak out. And then the one or two, like human rights lawyers or people who decide to speak the truth, would take all the pressure. And then they're being used as example to warn the rest of the population to not be like them.
And was it complicated to escape this environment when you arrived in Canada?
Unfortunately, back when I was in high school in Canada, I didn't have a great teacher like you all have to actually tell you about the tragic that's happening around the world and what we can do about it. When I was in high school, I think the education was kept very cautious and primitive to the point that you don't get in touch with any real issue. It's just liberal-minded, abstract concepts. So I was in a bubble, only until I walked out onto the street and talked to the Chinese dissidents. And that's when I had the chance to hear their story, real human story, which is very different from the idea. Real human story is what really moved me to the point that I felt like I had no choice but to speak up for these people. I didn't feel like I have an option. Like even nowadays, when some of my friends are being bullied, I didn't really feel like I have a choice. Partly because, not just because they're my friends, but because if they can be persecuted or attacked for their speech or free thinking right now, God knows when I'm going to be attacked. And it's only a matter of time. Now it's them, later on it's going to be me. So I might as well speak up right now when I can still show support and be of encouragement.
Yeah. So, what were your feelings when you heard about all the massacres and organ harvesting in China, and how did you react to that?
It took me a while to confront the gravity of the crime, to realize how serious it actually is. I heard about it when I was about 16 years old, but to seriously do something, it took me about 10 years. And I mean, people feel like probably it's very far away and has nothing to do with their real lives, but it does. I feel like in a way that if that is allowed to continue, deep down some part of me, my conscience felt wrong and very unsettling, like very not at ease. My, how to say, one of my movies is called The Bleeding Edge. It talks about the organ harvesting where I was acting as victim and locked onto a bed and have I really shouldn't spoil the movie. You should go all watch it. It's on Amazon. It's called The Bleeding Edge. And at the end of the movie, my character went through something really traumatic. And I think it's that humanity that really repelled me to do something after that's substantial.
You want to fight for their humanity?
I think they're really brave, these people. I think they're very brave because they're under authoritarian regime. The very reason why they're persecuted is because they have independent mind, which is something that all of us take for granted when we're in the West. And I think it's increasingly under attack now here in the West, where you're not really allowed to say certain things because it's deemed politically incorrect. And so I think these people are very brave to stand up for what they think is right, even though their lives might be a threat. In some way, I don't feel like I'm speaking up for them because they already got their conscience and their human soul is very strong. I feel like I'm doing it more for the people that they are also doing it for, which is the rest of the population, the Chinese population, where they never get to hear about the truth and have lived their entire life in complicity. I will probably say that member of the communist government. Well, I actually met a lot throughout my work to try to talk to them. Their way of communicating is very indirect because in that kind of society, you are often very disguising of your own thoughts to survive. Just like any dictatorship, they always find a small group of people to perpetrate the crime, to persecute. And then these small group of people are being used as scapegoat soon after to take the responsibility for the persecution. And they can never escape either the punishment from the free society or the punishment from their own government. We're seeing a lot of communist officials being thrown in jail for whatever reason. They say corruption, but oftentimes these people are also the ones that have perpetrated a crime against humanity. And the individuals in there should always take the choice of choosing, obeying their own conscience, even though it seems difficult at the moment. Because afterward, if they say, oh, the order comes from higher up that I should kill or torture this person. In the Second World War, there's this very important court case. Later on, the judge said to the soldier who has executed a lot of people, is that yes, you did take the order from higher on, but you had the choice of lifting your gun just an inch higher so that these people are not actually shot.
Are you tired of your flights?
Sometimes it can be very tiring, but I always come back to it, unfortunately. And I think I learned as I mature in the last couple of years. is that the tiredness will be there, but it's up to the individual to just keep going. And it's important to neglect the emotion that's involved. And sometimes I feel like I can be very emotional about the things I do, and that doesn't help at all. Like, for example, if a victim dies while he's waiting for UN refugee status, or some of my human rights work colleagues were under attack, these things can be very disencouraging. But then the small victories on the road can also help to build a lot of confidence.
What can we teenagers do to help you in your struggle?
I think teenagers nowadays have immense power over social media. And I think the first thing is to filter out the things that might not be true. So that requires a lot of your own research, independent thinking. And I think that takes practice. Now, after that, if you feel very certain about what you're speaking about is factually correct and logically sound, then take a platform and try to raise awareness yourself. I say this not just on the human rights sense, because that's my interest. You might be interested in something else, and that's also quite important. But what I'm talking about is a build-up of human character, a kind of character that takes resilience and perseverance to cultivate and to eventually achieve something that might not be in the mainstream acceptable, but true to your own conscience.
Don't take everything for granted.
Yeah, not taking everything for granted and not taking everything face value. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, someone may tell you, oh, that person is, I'm just being like very academic here. So take my words purely as an academic debate, not as any personal opinion. For example, someone may say to you, that person is being suppressed, that person is being racist, that person is being sexist. This kind of action is a violation against certain things. Well, sometimes it may be true, but there's so many competing rhetoric going on in society these days. It often takes a sound mind to sit there and not react so fast, to observe and to see what is the actual situation that's going on. Is things being taken out of proportion? Are things been used because of some people's motive? And just judge it for yourself.
I believe we have taken enough of your time, Anastasia.
I don't know, this is very enjoyable.
Oh, well, thank you very, very much for spending time with us, for giving us your time, but also your thoughts and your encouragements, and to be such an image and such an example of the fight that you have been using and doing for many years. So thank you very much for your help. We really appreciate, and all my students, I'm really, really happy to have met you. This is a wonderful experience. Thank you very much, Anastasia.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.